The story of Abraham and Sarah's family is not the story of super people. It is the story of ordinary people with all the baggage that comes with it. A people who are given an extraordinary mission. For reasons known only to God, God chooses this family to bear God's gift of blessing to the world. In today's episode, the story reaches its climax, and we get a significant clue to what God is up to. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, October 22nd, 2022. In yesterday's episode, Joseph's brothers sold Joseph into slavery to a passing caravan of Ishmaelites heading to Egypt. They return to their father Jacob and report that Joseph has been eaten by a lion. And of course, Jacob is distraught, for apparently Joseph was his favorite son. Now the story follows Joseph's strange fortunes in Egypt, beginning as a slave and ending up as Pharaoh's second in command. The story goes something like this. When Joseph arrives in Egypt, one of Pharaoh's officers, a man named Potiphar, buys him as his servant. Potiphar quickly discovers Joseph's administrative talents and puts him in charge of his household. In time, Joseph catches the eye of Potiphar's wife, who tries repeatedly but unsuccessfully to seduce him. She keeps after him until one day, when he again refuses her advances, she grabs his tunic. Joseph runs away from her, but unfortunately for him, his tunic comes off as he runs, leaving his clothing in her hands, an apparent smoking gun pointing to his guilt. Out of apparent spite, Potiphar's wife shows him Joseph's tunic. An enraged Potiphar has Joseph thrown into jail. Once again, though, Joseph proves his worth. The jailer sees his administrative skills and entrusts to Joseph's care the welfare of all the other prisoners. At some point, the royal cupbearer and the royal baker both manage to offend Pharaoh, and they land in jail, setting the stage for Joseph's skills in interpreting dreams to re-enter the story. The two men share with Joseph dreams they've had, and Joseph accurately interprets them. In 3 days, the royal cupbearer will be restored to his position, while in the same 3 days, the royal baker will be executed. Well, a couple of years pass, and Pharaoh has a dream he can't interpret. His royal cupbearer finally remembers Joseph and commends him to Pharaoh. Joseph is summoned before Pharaoh, who recounts his dream to Joseph. Joseph interprets the dream to Pharaoh and says that it portends 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph then recommends that Pharaoh immediately undertake a project to begin storing food for 7 years, so that when the years of famine come, there will be enough to sustain the people. So pleased is Pharaoh with this suggestion that he immediately elevates Joseph to be his second in command. All of which brings a reunion between Joseph and his brothers. When the famine finally hits, it hits hard. Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to buy and bring back enough grain to see them through the famine. When the sons arrive in Egypt, they appear before Joseph, who controls the stores of grain. Now, they don't recognize Joseph, but he recognizes them. And he hatches a plot to trick his brothers into returning to Canaan and then coming back with their youngest brother, Benjamin, in tow. In one last trick, Joseph plants his silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and then when the brothers depart once again for Canaan, Joseph sends his steward to catch them and arrest Benjamin. Suffice it to say that in the twists and turns of this plot, he has his brothers all twisted up, pleading for Benjamin's freedom. At this point, Joseph simply cannot keep himself hidden from them anymore. In a highly emotional scene, he reveals himself to his brothers. The story says, "Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out, 'Send everyone away from me.' So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?' But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come closer to me.' And they came closer. He said, 'I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his house, and the ruler over all the land of Egypt.'" Joseph's brothers are scared to death, and rightfully so. The brother they sold into slavery has now the power of life and death over them. But instead of seeking revenge, he is overjoyed with this reunion, rightly perceiving that what they had done was part of a divine plan to ensure the family's survival in a famine. He reasons he can't be angry with them for doing what ultimately was God's will. All of which nicely summarizes this entire Abraham family saga. What looks to us like a lot of shenanigans, backbiting, and family skullduggery turns out to fit into God's larger plan for their ultimate salvation, in order that they may fulfill God's purpose of redemption in the world. Turns out that in spite of our worst efforts, God uses us, even us, for God's purposes of bringing God's blessings to the world. And now may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.